Welcome to Profound Impact's Profound Insights webinar series. Today's episode is on the future of work, lifelong learning, and networking with digital communities. My name is Shannon-Vanstone, President and CEO of Profound Impact. It is exciting to have you with us today. We haven't seen many of you since our International Women's Day, Waterloo Region 2021 event on March 8th. If you did not attend that event, the conversations, musical interludes, and the activities of the day are on the IWD 2021 event page on the Profound Impact platform for your viewing. Before we jump into our conversation, note that this event is being recorded and that you, our attendees, are muted throughout this event. However, you may submit any questions you have through the discussion board on the Profound Impact platform, and we will try to address them during the Q&A session. Please use that same discussion board to introduce yourself, and if you have any issues with video or audio, please let us know and we will assist you. I'd like to also remind everyone to complete our free assessment tool on stakeholder engagement strategy on the Profound Impact platform, if you haven't done so already. At the end of this webinar, a name will be drawn from the list of registrants, and that organization will receive up to 4 hours of consulting at no charge with Barney Ellis Perry, Profound Impact's engagement strategist. Today, Profound Impact is excited to have 3 experts on the future of work offering their insights. Simon Chang, Vice President, Talent, Academy and Future of Work from Communitech, Dr. Judene Pretti, Director of Work Learn Institute at the University of Waterloo, and MacGregor, CEO and co-founder of Plum. Our moderator today is Rob Darling, Strategy and Business Development Advisor to Profound Impact. Now, Rob is passionate about building technology companies and brings a wealth of experience, connections, and business insights to Profound Impact. Now over to you, Rob.
Thank you so much, Sherry. I am, like you, so excited to talk with our 3 panelists here today. Each of them are a leader in the future of work, and they bring 3 very different perspectives: the education perspective, the community and ecosystem and corporation perspective, and the enterprise workplace perspective. So I'm just going to introduce our 3 panelists, and then we will dive into some questions. So I'm going to start with Simon Chan, who's the Vice President of Talent, Academy, and the Future of Work for Communitech. Simon is a thought leader and a speaker on the future of work and learning, focusing on communities and organizations and how they can collaborate and execute to prepare for this new world of constant change. Dr. Judene Pretti, Director of Work Learn Institute, the University of Waterloo. Dr. Pretti is the director of the Work Learn Institute and has focused on the future of work to examine predictive trends and to consider the implications for preparation of students. That work led Judene to develop the Future Ready Talent Framework, which we'll talk about today, a competency tool that is used at the University of Waterloo within the CoOp and experiential learning, our education portfolio, to help students think about how they are developing the skills and competencies that will be important for their careers in this future of work. And our 3rd panelist is MacGregor, CEO and co-founder of Plum. She has vision and tenacity, and she has incomparable resilience. She has led Plum's evolution and growth from a pre-employment assessment solution to a robust talent resilience platform that is revolutionizing how enterprise organizations manage their talent across the employee lifecycle. It is also my pleasure to introduce Brian Romansky, who will discuss the features of the Profound Impact platform. Brian is the Chief Strategic Advisor at Profound Impact, leading the AI and data analytics to provide data visualizations for building digital communities and uncovering stories of successful collaboration. So to start off with our first question, in the Future Ready Talent Framework research, Judene, it mentions that understanding the values of the next generation of talent might be the most important thing you can learn to recruit, motivate, and retain talent. What are some of the things that the research team found that made this stand out?
Thanks, Rob. And thank you to Profound Impact for inviting me here today. So yes, in our Future Ready Talent Framework, in the development of that, a tool largely meant to support students in their achievement of the important talents that will prepare them for the future. We did uncover some interesting work. We did some interesting work related to student values. And one study that we did, we found that students, 50% of students reported they would be unlikely to accept a job that matched their skills, but not their values. And we found that really striking. And what we did dig into a little bit further was to look at what the values and motivators were for Gen Z, and to compare those with what organizations both believe their organization values, but also what they believe Gen Z values. And an interesting gap that came about, I won't get into all the details of the findings, but one of the interesting was that there was more of a gap between what organizations perceived Gen Z valued and what they valued versus what their organizations offered. And so that was encouraging to me in the sense that there's not as much of a gap, I think, between what Gen Z is looking for in terms of recruitment, what they're looking for in roles, as compared to what organizations are offering. But we do need to be a little bit careful, those of us who aren't in Gen Z, about what we perceive them as, what we perceive as being important. We also did some work analyzing CoOp job postings. And when we reviewed 70,000 job postings for CoOp roles, we looked at the behaviors of students and found that where there were keywords in the job posting that related to company culture, there was a much higher rate of applications of students. So I think that speaks to the importance of culture and brand and communicating that with employees, both from the recruitment phase, but obviously also in day-to-day work. The other thing that I would highlight is that we've done some work with students related to remote work over the last year that many of them have been engaged in. And while they are still having opportunities, they're reporting they have opportunities to contribute and to learn. One area that we're seeing a significant decline is in students' reports of being able to build their professional network. And so that would be a caution to organizations who are moving forward with hybrid or remote workplaces, is how to ensure that the next generation of talent has a way to connect and build their professional network, even in a remote setting.
Wow, that's really interesting. Caitlin and Simon, what are some of the strategies, and Judene, that the company should consider to better understand the values of the next generation and current generation of employees?
I could jump in. I think what we've seen consistently is that there is a desire for people to be given the opportunity to rise to their potential. Everybody is trying to get their foot in the door, and especially early in their career, there's not a lot of proof points. And so looking for companies that are looking to invest in that potential and then to develop it internally so that people see a career path, they understand the type of growth. I think that when there's an emphasis on company culture, it's recognizing that that command and control style of leadership where you give somebody a salary and in exchange they're supposed to show up and work, that's really antiquated. Now it's about how do you support people to grow in their careers. The opportunity of them joining your organization is one where they're going to start that journey of lifelong learning, and they want to understand how they're going to be somewhere different year, 2 years down the road after joining your company. And so really clearly saying, you know, we're going to take a risk and bring you in early, and then we're going to help you develop. We're going to help you go along the way. And then recognizing too, part of that growth is alignment with what is it that your company is trying to do in terms of growth, and does that align with the person's type of growth? And so there's often an element of what is the company's purpose? What is the company's why? And does that align with that person's purpose and why? And that there's a lot more emphasis on that alignment and growth than just a salary or just the, the free lunches and things like that. And I think understanding that that's what's valued early on helps attract more of this, of the opportunity of capturing that untapped potential.
Yeah, I'll jump in, and I think Caitlin did a great job of just kind of talking about the purpose around the whole piece around growth and how individuals are looking for that opportunity. I think what we're talking about is really a shift in how careers and how the workforce interacted 20, 30, 40 years ago, where it was largely a one size fits all mentality, which is you come into an organization and more or less everyone's having the same experience, to a much more personalized experience. And we're seeing this in, all walks of life, whether it's, consumer marketing, et cetera. We don't, whether you're Gen Z, whether you're millennials, whether you're boomers, like, we don't walk into our workplaces anymore and kind of take off our people hats, our human hats, and walk into work and go, oh, I'm gonna accepting of a completely different one size fits all experience. All of our daily lives, we have now seen personalization as it relates to technology, et cetera. And I think what's happening is that expectation is carrying over into the workplace. And so, what can some employers do? I think it really is around, employee experience is probably an overused term already, but it is really around taking a much more human or employee-centric view of what their attitudes, behaviors, motivations are, and designing, to the degree possible, an experience that's tailored to what they're looking for, as opposed to this, as Caitlin pointed out, antiquated way of providing a workplace environment where it's, the same experience that I have, Caitlin has, Judene has. We're all different. We're going to be looking for different things. So how do you create that experience? And more importantly, we'll talk, I'm sure, about telling that story to prospective candidates.
So let me just ask a question here. If they're looking for the values of an organization, the culture and the words matter a lot for where they apply. All people are looking for a personalized experience. How do corporations handle this to be able to manage, now hundreds or thousands of employees who need a personalized experience instead of a cookie cutter kind of solution?
I'm going to jump in on this one because this is my wheelhouse. So if you want to be a human-centric company, you have to understand your humans. And right now, I would say that it's a data problem. Most companies don't understand their people. They don't understand what the potential of their people are. They don't understand how to leverage their strengths. They don't know how to best support them so that they're setting them up to thrive. And it's because they don't have the data to understand people. Right now, talent decisions are being made using historical data. It's this rear view mirror judgment on what somebody has done previously. But organizations, all of us, be it small startups or large institutions, the jobs are changing as quickly as every 6 months, even in large enterprise organizations. Sorry, I feel myself getting on my soapbox here. You
go, Caitlin. I'll pile on later.
And so, business needs are changing. Business strategies are changing. And so there is this need to take people, regardless of what they did in the past, and repurpose them and put them into roles they've never done. And that means that why not take the risk on somebody earlier in their career to put them on a job they've never done? But same thing with mid or late career. We need to embrace the fact that we need people to be aligned to these changing business goals. And the only way we can keep up with that pace of adaptation is to set people up into roles where they can naturally learn and adapt successfully. And the thing is not everybody can adapt to all roles equally. If I'm naturally predisposed to come up with out-of-the-box ideas and to solve problems and to work well in teams, then put me in a new role that has to be built from scratch, and I've got a team of people I have to collaborate to do that. But if I'm better at, creating process once something is up and going and working and defining how to then make that repeatable, that's not going to be me. Bring somebody else in that's going to be amazing at that. And so it's kind of this, we used to talk about this years ago, but if you're at all familiar with, the money ball concept of a sports team. It's not about having the person that is, the best at hitting the ball or the best runner. It's about a combination of how do you get the best person for the best role. That's how you create the best teams. And so you need to understand in your company how to really leverage people's strengths. And if you are giving somebody an opportunity to leverage their strengths, they're going to be loyal. They're going to stay with you. They're going to feel like they're growing. They're going to feel like they're fulfilled. We each, at the end of the day, do our own checklist. Do I feel amazing? Am I thriving? Or am I absolutely drained and am I getting close to burnout? And I think that companies have an opportunity to get every single person in their organization into a place where they're thriving, because they won't leave and they'll produce their maximum output, which will help the company.
Amazing. Simon, do you have any extra thoughts?
I think what I would add to what Caitlin said is I also think there's a time element here. So I think we're in a really unique period of time right now with COVID and the pandemic, and on both sides, on the employer side and also on the workforce side of things. Like we've had, I don't know, probably better than 14, 15 months to really think and sit and think about what's important to us, right, as human beings. And so I think your question was, well, like, how can organizations do this? My question would be, how can't they do this? Because what's going to happen is that you're going to have, and a reminder, we're all having the same moment at the same time. So I think that you're going to have a workforce generally that is now pondering and thinking about, well, how do I want to spend my time, right? I've just spent 15 months, maybe at home, maybe working hybrid, et cetera, but I've had a chance to reevaluate all aspects of my life, including my workplace relationship. And so I think if those organizations are not thinking in the way that Caitlin described, and building on the competencies of what Judene highlighted in the talent framework, I think you're not going to win the talent battle, right? And I think we all know that that's fierce. I also think that there's, it's not black and white. I think that you don't have to go to, micro personalization. I think what Caitlin said is right. There's not enough data. I think that's, again, whether you're doing consumer marketing, the more data that you have, the more precise you can get in terms of that personalized experience. But I think you can do some, a baby step might be talking to your employees and trying to understand, again, what are some of their attitudes and motivators, to segment them into maybe 3 or 4 different categories, right? There's obviously, solution options out there. Caitlin would have one through Plum, but there are companies that provide you with those insights that you can start to build on. So I think my question would be rather, it's not how can they do it, it's what happens if they don't.
Mm-hmm. Great question. So back to the Future Ready Talent Framework and the values piece and what you guys learned in that research. In the past few weeks, there's been a couple, actually 2 high-profile tech CEOs that have said they will not engage in societal issues unless it is directly tied to business. Is this a culture and brand mistake based on what the research is saying, Judene, or is this to be expected? Is this a shift? And I'm looking for. I'm sure all 3 of you have some great insights on this.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's obviously so much in the media that when I think my focus has been on next gen talent. So when I think about next gen talent and the decisions that they're making, they are incorporating all aspects of social media into the decisions that they're making. And so I don't think there's a one size. I don't think it's right or it's wrong necessarily, but it is going to impact populations in different ways. So for some students, they would be turned away from organizations who aren't willing to take a stand with respect to specific issues. And for others, that isn't something they're necessarily going to look for, and they might be offended if a different position was taken. So I think it's very difficult territory to navigate, but there's no question that that next gen talent in particular are impacted by the messaging that companies put out through a variety of messaging they do or they don't put out through a variety of ways.
Any other thoughts on that from Caitlin or Simon? Caitlin, yeah.
I think that part of the trend of people wanting to work for purpose-driven organizations is they want to work for an organization that creates a positive impact on the world. And I think this idea of I create a widget and I work for a company and get a salary that creates a widget and there's no positive impact on the world has become less and less appealing, especially as you're not restricted to work in your own backyard anymore. There's tons of options. You can work, anywhere where the time zones kind of align, you can now go and work. And so the choices of people are much broader. And so they want to work for places that, start to build a legacy of how they're creating that positive impact on the world. And so when an organization says, we're only going to do building this widget that is our North Star, and we are going to refrain from having an impact, it becomes this thing of, by being a bystander, you are actually part of the problem sometimes. By standing and watching something horrific happen and not speaking up, you are just as guilty as the person that committed the crime. And I feel like these companies are going on record to say, we're going to be silent bystanders. And I personally think it's a mistake. I think that corporate social responsibility came out in the 90s. Like, enterprise organizations said, wait a second, we have a responsibility to the environment. Wait a second, we have responsibilities. The idea of purpose-driven leadership is that all of your stakeholders, like any company that says, our number one priority is our customers, well, then you're already recognizing that, your customers' best interests are yours. And so if you serve a diverse customer base, then being silent against social justice issues means that you're actually hurting your customers. Like, if you really prioritize your customers, then you recognize that you prioritize your employees, because your employees are the ones that deliver to your customers. If you care about your employees, then you also care about your board members, not just for the financial returns to shareholders, but because you want to honor their commitment to you as a company. And so I don't understand how you can honor all your stakeholders and choose to be silent. It just seems to me completely backwards and against where things are going. And I think that one of the mistakes, and I'm going to call them out, Basecamp, was not that Basecamp was trying to say, we want this to be a psychologically safe environment for our employees, and there are polarized discussions happening, and we want to create that psychological safety. That was not the tone of the message. The tone of the message was, you guys are all entitled brats, and I'm sick and tired of it, eroding productivity. It was tone deaf. It was the opposite of supporting their employees. It came from a very selfish place as a leader that couldn't handle the complexity. That organization is less than 60 people. And there were real concerns voiced of a lack of representation and diversity being heard at the leadership team. And instead of really leading from a place of being a feedback culture and making sure people were heard and properly supported, they said, this noise is distracting, I can't handle it. And it was just entirely tone deaf. So I think that their approach was the mistake, their wording was the mistake, and it really showed a lack of maturity from the leadership team, that they have not evolved to be kind of best practices of all the research in terms of what it is to be the best type of leader. Sorry, that one really it was such a mistake in my mind, but we've had open discussions. Not everybody agrees with that. Some of them would like it to be a little bit cleaner and a little bit clearer and less confusing. And I can appreciate that. I just think the tone deafness of Basecamp's message was the biggest problem.
Yeah, so I guess I'll go to business objective, right? If we really want to think from a business objective standpoint. So if I would look at those organizations who said they want to, stay away from those topics, what are your business objectives? And then the next question is, what is the talent? What are the skills you need to be able to execute on your business objectives? And what's the talent you need that has those skills? If you work through that logic, if this research that's coming out from, the University of Waterloo, et cetera, is aligned with that values alignment. I think in the US, it's close to 50. I think it's 46% of the working population full-time now is Gen Z and millennials. So you're making a choice, right? So if that's what's valuable to them, and they're almost 50% of the population, then you're making a choice on where you want to play from a talent standpoint. Again, it's not going to be everybody, but I think that's the way I would tend to look at it is, what are your business objectives? What skills do you need? Who has the talent? And are you going to be able to attract that talent in the future if you're not weighing in on these topics where these topics are very important to that segment of the population.
And so if you are a company who is going to go after societal issues and speak out to them, how do you align your CSR and your people to ensure the culture is attractive to new recruits? So how do you make sure that there's alignment, that the people buy into what the organization is fighting for, or the initiatives that they have?
I know that Basecamp wanted to shut down all employee committees, but there's best practices in employees committees. It comes down to feedback, you know, that the people that are building your business, like it's not the CEO that's responsible for all the success, it's the employees that go in and put the work in every day. And one of the ways to see that there's alignment is to involve them in the process, to make sure their voice is heard, to create a culture of feedback where, you know, their voice, so that everybody at least feels heard. It doesn't mean that you go with every opinion, but there is an opportunity for them to voice what they think could make the company better. And often those ideas are some of the best things that a company can do, because those people know what needs to be fixed. They know where the support needs to be placed. And that was the direct feedback. You know, 1/3 of Basecamp's employees left the company after this happened. And there are very specific comments that were brought up in advance from employees in terms of what would create a better environment, a safer environment, one where they felt included and respected, and their diversity was really reflected in the company. And so the ideas were there, the ways of being there were just with the employees and the feedback. And there was a choice to not listen to that feedback. There was a choice to not solicit the feedback and create a safe environment for it. And so, you know, it's something as a company, kind of, we're at 36 people. It's the next stage of our evolution is how do we create a better feedback culture? How do we do, you know, one-on-ones so that we're having those conversations, but how do we institutionalize it so that it becomes embedded in our culture? And it's not an easy task. And there's different methods like employee committees. I think that especially as we move to this new world of work where our employees are more dispersed, I think it's a challenge that we need to strive to answer that question. I don't think there's a perfect answer, but I think there's a lot of best practices, and it's up to us to figure out how to make sure that we're accomplishing that feedback loop in our companies.
Simon, are you seeing anything from the companies you're speaking with around this? What are some of the best practices that they're doing to align those things?
I think a lot of it is what Caitlin said, is they're involving their employees, right? Their smell test, I guess, is really around whether their employees are able to have a voice, able to participate in causes that they feel are important to them, and that the culture is evolving to a place where you can have these open discussions. But I think a lot of it, we're still probably at the fairly early stage of some of these areas, and a lot of it comes down to starting with the education process to help people understand what some of these issues are, and then providing an environment where they're able to have dialogue, have a voice, and more importantly, get involved.
Awesome. Judene, would you be able to explain some of the key areas of the Future Ready Talent Framework so that our guests could understand what it is?
Sure, happy to do that, Rob. So we spent about a year-long process developing a talent framework that we could use across our co-op and other work integrated learning programs to help students orient their thinking towards the predicted changes for the future of work. So a future-oriented competency framework. We ended up with 12 talents, and they're grouped together in 4 clusters. So the clusters are expand and transfer expertise. So the recognition that's been mentioned several times in the call about how people are going to need to adapt and move from one context to another. One of the things that's interesting about co-op in particular is that students have multiple opportunities to be employed over the course of their work term, which gives them that experience in saying, how has what I've learned here position me to then be competitive for another role, and how do the skills that I've learned in one context transfer to another. A second area is around develop self. So the self-awareness, the self-management, the understanding about lifelong learning and career development, and highlighting that for students at a fairly young age, that it isn't just going to be, finish your degree and you're done with learning. And so helping them recognize the ways in which they themselves are can find support as a learner. The third is develop relationships. So a key component in any successful, for any success in the future of work or any work is being able to develop those relationships and incorporating the components of communication, collaboration, and intercultural effectiveness. And then the last cluster of talents we have is in design and deliver solutions. So this is where we've incorporated an innovation mindset. Obviously a critical component for entrepreneurs, but we're arguing and positioning for our students that an innovation mindset is going to be critical no matter what work environment they go into. Critical thinking, which obviously has been a skill that has been important. We see it as becoming increasingly important as people are making decisions about what things can be done, can be automated, what things need to be done by humans. And then the last thing is implementation, which particularly is relevant for the work integrated learning or co-op students as far as getting things done. So executing on timelines and what's expected and being able to be independent in managing it. So that's the framework that we've developed, and it's being worked into the operations across the co-op and experiential portfolio, which includes the performance evaluation that employers complete at the end of work term. So students will be evaluated there. The top areas of strengths and areas for development will be identified, which then will help students make decisions about future work experiences and also be able to pick what professional development courses they want to supplement their formal education with.
Interesting. So on the self-improvement and professional development side, according to the data from the World Economic Forum and Deloitte, 30% of skills that employees use today were unknown to them a year ago. So is upskilling the responsibility of the employees or the workplace? What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. Happy to give my thoughts, and then I'm sure Simon and Caitlin also have thoughts on that. So in research that we did related to the future of work, this was one of the themes that was identified, is that this adaptation for the future of work is the responsibility is going to need to fall in a variety of places. So there needs to be government recognition and support in terms of providing resources to organizations. Obviously, organizations need to invest in their people. Caitlin was talking about this earlier, bring them in, but then talk about how can you invest in helping them move to new roles. And then I think also on the individual side. So, the acknowledgement that there is going to be a need to continually assess where your skills are at and what opportunities might exist for you to be able to upskill.
Caitlin and Simon?
So I think that I feel like we're all agreeing, but I mean, I agree with Judene. I think it is the responsibility of government employers. I think the question is just around the how and the weighting and how do they work together on that. But I think that the individual we need to up the individual agency of individuals to recognize that they play a role, and they have to, they're not in a set it, forget it mindset anymore, and that the process is evolving, they need to evolve with it. Employers are an interesting one because a lot of the feedback that we've traditionally received is that, well, if I invest in training Rob and Rob leaves, like that's sunk cost that I've spent X amount of dollars, et cetera, developing Rob. But I think that, again, if you looked at the research in terms of why individuals select employers, values will be up there, but what's creeping up there is that opportunity for development. And I also think we can't confuse what we would consider traditional training, as in like in classroom, going back to school, whatever it is. That's not necessarily, I think, what they're talking about when they're saying training. It's really around more, how do I grow and develop as a human being? And along with that, the skills I need to be able to progress my career. And I think employers, again, if they don't provide those types of opportunities or highlight that those are available, they're at risk of losing out on talent that values that and recognizes that they need to do that. And then government, this the last piece would just be around, how do they lower the burden for employers and individuals to be able to engage in these activities in a way that fits with, the competing pressures of companies that they have to make sure that they're competitively globally, because we are obviously in a very global environment. And then individually, how do we support individuals in being able to financially take on some of these development programs as they're working and have, multiple obligations other than just professional obligations.
Yeah, I agree with what has already been said. I think the only thing I can add is when I think about upskilling and reskilling, I go back to the kind of rule of thumb around professional development. 70% of development happens on the job. 20% happens through job shadowing and mentoring, and then 10% happens through formal learning. So an online course, training initiative, something like that. And so that 70% of on-the-job learning is what's critical. And so it's both on the employee to be making sure that they're setting themselves up in a job and in tasks and different opportunities that give them that on-the-job opportunity to grow and change and learn. And then also recognizing that, that means that people who may want to go into new areas or learn new things may need to recognize that they may need to take a step back, that it's not about the traditional career ladder of constantly improving in seniority, that you may need to move laterally, you may need to move, horizontally, you may need to take a step back in order to progress, in order to get that on-the-job experience. Where you don't have experience means you might need to do something slightly more junior to then get that on-the-job opportunity to then jump forward long-term. And that mindset in terms of different job opportunities aren't just about salary and career advancements, they're about those learning opportunities is a critical part of the equation. The other thing that I always think about is about 5-6 years ago, Netflix came out with this thing talking about how you can train coal miners to be software developers. And like, that was the future of work at the time, is we're just going to take all coal miners and make them software developers. And the issue with that is that, yeah, maybe 2% of coal miners would make great software developers, but it doesn't come down to training them Ruby on Rails, which nobody uses anymore. It comes down to, are they going to thrive in that environment? Do they have that analytical thinking, attention to detail? Do they love constantly learning new code? If we can identify all of the people that would thrive as software developers and then train them to be software developers, awesome. But if we're going to take a one-size-fits-all and say everybody should become software developers and that's the future of work strategy, then what we're doing is literally investing in people to be unhappy and unsuccessful moving forward. So there's the first identifying where is somebody going to thrive. We have an example all the time that we talk about is, Maya, who was an underwriter for 6 years, and she ended up being the best person in the company to move into product management. Nothing in her history said that she'd make a good product manager, but her ability to innovate and adapt and execute were the behavioral competencies needed for that role. And that company was able to retain that institutional knowledge. They were able to retain a top performer. And within 6 months, she was outperforming product managers with 15 years of prior experience because she spent the first 6 months absorbing everything she could online, reading everything she could, job shadowing. And because she had all that knowledge of the company, she was able to surpass other newcomers by just being given the opportunity. So I think it's first about identifying people that are going to be successful once the upskilling is complete and making sure that you look at it from a on-the-job experience is going to be a big part of that. And so there's a bit of a risk on both sides. And so I love what Simon was saying. How can the government help reduce that risk on the individual and the employer as they go through this? And then how can institutions make sure that when that upskilling and that formal learning piece come into part, that it's tailored to the ones that are going to get the best ROI from it?
Interesting. There's so many little tidbits of information the three of you have thrown out today that I just want to dive deeper into, but I know it would take a whole other session. I just want to make a comment on that. Like, if 70% of your learning and training happens on the job, then doesn't that change how people apply for jobs? Because a lot of people apply for a job that they think they can do 100%, right? But if 70% is coming from on the job, then how you apply for jobs, how they screen for candidates, how they post jobs should probably change too. And I'm sure that's a whole other conversation, but I'd love to dive deeper with the three of you sometime on. Organizations like Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, Google, and Microsoft have digital alumni networks with alumni benefits. And this is part of some of the companies and their move to future work and networks and growing these networks. You know, what is the role of alumni digital communities in the future of work?
I think
go ahead, Caitlin. No, go ahead, Caitlin.
I think that the idea is communication. You know, in this world that is rapidly changing and people are getting farther and farther away than their desks in order to accomplish their work, the idea is that, you know, you want to create a tighter knit communication loop with people that are aligned in what you're trying to accomplish. And so, you know, I always respected that Patty McCord, when she was at Netflix, said, you know, we don't expect you to spend your entire career here, but I want you to be able to look back and say, this was the best place I ever worked. And it's easy to say, it's hard to implement. You know, it's my goal to make that a reality at my company. And so even as people move on, there is an opportunity to say, hey, there is still value in that relationship and maintaining that relationship. That could be, you know, word of mouth, we're opening this role, you know, you're no longer here, but is somebody in your network there? Or we just had this amazing milestone that we're trying to share with the world. They're an extra way of amplifying it. So, and I think that, you know, people that have helped build your company and build your institution, they've dedicated years of their life to your success. They want to see you successful. They want to be kept in the loop. They want to feel like that contribution is leaving a legacy for them and what they've contributed to. So I think there's a win-win by tightening that communication. And it's tough to find those places. You know, we have Facebook for, you know, our friends and strangers, but it doesn't really have that common bond. LinkedIn groups, I don't think that that's really sticking around. And so the question is how do we bring people together with a common purpose? And that history of work is one of the places we're spending most of our time in. And so being able to bring people together and keep that tight relationship, I think is very important.
Yeah, I'd add to that, just maybe taking a step back and looking at how things have changed, right? So if you look at how career paths have changed, and I'll try to weave a bunch of things that we've all talked about into this as well, but like we used to very much have a very linear career path, right? 30, 40 years ago, you kind of went to school for 4 years, you'd work at the same employer, maybe the same industry. If you're saucy, you wanted to go to another employer in the same sector. But you largely stayed in the same area, and everybody kind of moved at the same time, right? So, you know, your friends you went to school with, they went to work, they all worked for a while, they all had kids, they all retired at 65, and it was a very linear career path or life path. I think what you're seeing now is a much more fragmented life path where people will go, we're living a lot longer, right? And the world is much more in flux than it was before. You don't have, well, unless you're in the university sector, you don't have defined benefit plans that keep you necessarily at a particular employer for a long period of time. So by definition, you're seeing more transitions. So you're seeing multiple stages of life, you're seeing multiple careers, and that creates the need for more transitions. So if you think, 40 years ago, we may have had 2 or 3 major transitions in our life, right? When we went from school to work to retirement, et cetera. Today, we're going from transition to transition, whether it be different employers, whether it be taking a sabbatical, whether it be going on maternity leave, et cetera. And so I think this is where digital communities are really interesting, because I think usually when people are going to chart off on a new path, it's easiest if they can see someone else who's already done it, or they can rely on a community of people that can give them support on how to do that. And I think that's the power of digital communities, particularly when it relates to the workplace, is that you have a natural group of people that you can lean on that can help you through career transitions, et cetera. So I think it's smart to be thinking about that. And also, to Caitlin's point, just recognizing the fact that people are not going to stay at your organization for, or not likely to stay at your organization for an extended period of time. So rather than fight that, embrace it and use it as a tool to be able to help your business. You know, the last point I'll make is just around the fact that if you look at, you know, most companies that are saying they want innovation. Well, one of the, you know, there's innovation, but then there's innovation grounded in practicality. So when I think about a digital community who have people who may understand your business, but also have had experiences in other sectors now or other companies, they can be a boomerang employee and come back with a whole set of new experiences, but actually be grounded in what you know. Or they can refer people who have the expertise that you're looking for, but again, it's grounded in a bit of understanding of what your organization's all about. And so when you think about kind of workforces in the future around workforce ecosystems, where they're not all just full-time employees and you're using a combination of full-time employees with some contractors, et cetera, I think digital communities have a very interesting space or play in terms of how they knit that all together for organization.
Awesome.
Yeah, I see. Sorry, go ahead, Rob.
Go ahead, Judene. I was just going to ask if you had any thoughts.
I was just going to say that for us, it's a subset of this, but I can see it both from the perspective of as an academic institution and seeing the impact of the courses and the experiences that students have had while they're in undergrad and grad and then beyond. But also when I think about the employers who really effectively use CoOp as a talent pipeline for their organizations, this is exactly what they do, because they're doing what Caitlin mentioned about, you know, these are ambassadors now. So they may not be an employee down the road, but they may know people who they can then say, oh, this would be a great fit for you. And so I think those digital communities, keeping track of students who come in and out, especially the stars that you want to follow, is a strategy that the companies who most effectively use CoOp as a talent pipeline, that's what they're really good at.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much for everybody's thoughts today. It was amazing. I have so many more questions that I'd love to dive in with with you. We're just going to go to some of the attendees' questions to see what they have, and then we will pass the baton over to Brian. So one question was, if 70% of learning happens on the job, how does that change how people apply for jobs? Everybody wants to go deeper on that one.
I think this is part of what the future of work is about, is that we need to change the way that we are evaluating people. We have to recognize that those hard skills, that past experience, that shelf life is really small, and it's getting smaller and smaller. Like I said, Ruby on Rails was the hottest thing. It was so expensive to hire. There weren't enough Ruby on Rails developers, and now nobody is coding in Ruby on Rails unless they're trying to keep a legacy system alive. And so I think that, you know, recognizing that what actually predicts performance are people's innate talents, what really makes them exceptional compared to their peers, be that teamwork or execution or innovation or adaptation or persuasion. You know, we need to start focusing on what is transferable and what will allow somebody to produce their best work, and start really evaluating people based on their potential and not that past experience. And it's tough because it's so ingrained in us to pattern match. It is a fault as human beings. And the problem is when we pattern match, we really are only seeing the world through a very specific lens, and we're missing out of all these other people that would be a great fit. And often we're great diverse backgrounds that don't match what we've previously seen. And so I think, you know, part of the solution is that we start focusing on potential, and we look for those transferable innate talents that people have, and start to get rid of things like, you know, eligibility criteria that really, if you had this most amazing person that can hustle, would you really care about those eligibility criteria? And the answer is no. If I had the right person, I wouldn't let this get in the way. Well, then it shouldn't be part of the application. And recognize, even, you know, there is a difference in terms of who applies. It is consistent that men will apply for a role when they have 3 out of 10 of the qualifications, but women feel that they have to have at least 8, if not more, of the qualifications to even apply. So we're really hurting ourselves by jam-packing those job descriptions with all of these eligibility thresholds, where really that should be to be promoting your values and promoting what your North Star and your purpose, and using it to attract as many people as possible, and not be using it to filter people out.
Simon,
Yeah. Go ahead, Judene.
Yeah, I was going to say from the flip side, and to your point, Caitlin, absolutely, about the male versus female applicants. For us to be coaching students in the university about roles being for development and how to position themselves to say, I don't have this yet, but I can learn. It's something I can learn, and here's how I can show you my interest. So I think work can be done on both sides.
Amazing.
Yeah, I would just add from a talent perspective, we spend a lot of time listening to companies here talking about what they need from a talent perspective, and they all say the same thing. They all want software engineers. They all want people who have, can do AI and data, et cetera. And they're all looking for the same individual. So by definition, if you're all looking at the same individual, you'd have to have an amazing value proposition to be able to convince that individual to come work for you. Likely, you're gonna have to pay a lot of money as well. So I think about what Caitlin and Judene both talked about is, rather than you got to go down that route to a degree, but rather than do that, what's the innovative way of looking at talent in a different way to unlock other people's potential to be able to fill that talent gap that you have, and really focusing on, what's the outcome that you're looking for, and how do you actually look at upskilling people to be able to allow them to move into those roles as a different way to be able to fill your talent needs. And then I guess, from a practical standpoint, because I think lots of people always want, what's the practical thing I can do out of these webinars, is if there is such an emphasis on workplace experience, et cetera, I would be thinking about, when I'm having a discussion with my leader, around what are the skills I want to develop, and what project or what stretch opportunity could I ask for that would allow me to demonstrate and learn those skills, right? I think that's rather than, I've talked to lots of people who are like, I'm going to go back and do an MBA. I'm like, awesome. So what is it? And then I have nothing against MBAs. I have one myself, but like, what is it that you're trying to achieve? And let's just be a little more thoughtful about what's the best way to get there.
Interesting. Well, I just want to say thank you again for your great insights today. I loved this conversation. I thought you gave us so many things to think about. So thank you, Simon, Judene, and Caitlin. And at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Brian.
Thanks, Rob. And thanks also to all the panelists. Really great discussion. And yeah, I can see where this could go on for a while and continue to be interesting. I'm just going to mention briefly, so for those of you who are watching, and if you're logged into the Profound Impact platform at demo.profoundimpact.com, I would invite you to do a couple of things while you're there. One is any thoughts that you have, reactions, comments about what you heard from the panelists, or your own views on the future of work. Feel free to post them into the discussion thread, and we will certainly be watching that and be happy to respond. Any questions that you have that you didn't get answered, you can post them there as well. I'd also invite you to take a look on the left side of the screen. You should have access to a couple of samples of graphs. So one of the things that the panelists talked about, and there's so many different topics, but I'll just touch on a couple. So one of them is that the future of work, it's more than just what you do in your education. It's about the full person and the breadth of experiences that they have. They're going to be learning on the job and bringing a breadth of experience to their next job and their future jobs. So at Profound Impact, we are trying to collect a more holistic view of individuals. And one of our goals is to help universities and technical research institutions really understand the impact that they have on students and participants who are in their programs, and then go off into the world to understand what impact did the university or the program have on those individuals. What did those people go and do with it? And you'll see that some of them, the vast majority of them, bring it to some sort of career and professional work, and certainly have a visualization that shows connections among people who have worked at the same location and moved on to other jobs, and the networking effect of people who have worked at the same location. You can see that visually on our platform. But we also think that there's other aspects of those individuals' lives that are important. So things like volunteer organizations that they work with or mentoring relationships that they have. So if you click around some of the graphs, and I can share a couple, although I don't know how well you can see it on screen. If you take a look at the volunteer graph that we have, you're going to see that there's many connections that people have through the different volunteer organizations that they worked at together. And this is a self-organizing graph, meaning it clusters naturally based on the people who have worked together most often. And then you'll see on the right side, there's some groupings where you can, we naturally cluster people who have connections to each other. So there's one large group in there of people who have all had some sort of connection by working through the same volunteer organizations. Wouldn't it be useful if the organization that those people had all participated in together could understand how those volunteer experiences have shaped their future career paths, how their mentorships have shaped those future career paths, or how maybe people who have worked for a particular academic advisor in their academic career had certain boosts to their career. Maybe there's a certain notion about continuous learning that they were inspired through that experience that has helped them. So through Profound Impact, we are both a digital community that can help people understand their own career path and those of their peers, but also we're recognizing the power of the platform to teach an institution how they're helping people launch their careers and shape those careers, and providing data to those institutions from individuals who are willing to share their information back with the institution, the university, or research org that they were at. Make it possible for them to understand how they've shaped those careers and how those careers have blossomed after that. So again, if you have any thoughts or comments on that, or if there's some visuals or graphs that you think we should be sharing through the platform, please do post them into the comments and let us hear what you have to say. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Sherry, who's going to close us out and tell us what's coming up next.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian and Rob, and thank you for our esteemed experts, Caitlin, Judene, and Simon, for sharing your journey and taking the time with us today, and for allowing Profound Impact to be a partner in that journey. For you attendees today, I hope that you have been receiving our monthly newsletter. This month's newsletter highlighted the career and impact of Dr. Judene Pretti, one of the panelists. I think this is one of the most exciting sessions of the newsletter. So if you know someone who you believe has made an impact and you think we should highlight, please let me know. Now we're excited to have the draw for the prize of the 4 hours of Barney's consulting services, courtesy of Profound Impact. And I will take the lucky hat and pull out a name and open it up, and it is Victoria Chappell of the Business and Higher Education Roundtable. Congratulations, Victoria, and I will look forward to reaching out to you and introduce you to Barney. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope we can continue this conversation about the Profound Impact platform and how we can help your organization provide a digital community to not only measure your global impact, but also to facilitate and accelerate connectivity to inspire collective solutions to difficult global problems. See you for our next webinar. We will be sending out that information when we have put it together, and I hope you have a marvelous day. Thank you.